I'm Jackson. I have zero experience with carpentry.
I studied at a school for historic preservation in Boston and learned about how things were built, 250 years ago.
There's a long way to go. I'm nowhere near the top. Not that I thought I was, but there's so much more to do out there.
Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast, episode about the White House. We don't have a great question about this. We're trying something new here. Really excited to hear your comments and feedback on it. So please, 500 words or less, write us an essay on what you think of this style of episode, because we know this guy's got a lot of history knowledge, and Richard and I aren't there historically wise.
He was there.
He was there. Yeah,
oh, okay.
That's why he's so old. But we don't really know as much, and I would say the layman does not know as much as you do about history. And so I guess we could really start this off by saying this is Brent and welcome to his TED Talk on the White House.
That is not what this is, but we
are doing a quiz.
So
it's competition.
Here's the deal. Obviously, I love history. I think learning from the past is a big thing. So this started because we were talking about two presidents who were architects. Are you saying
that you're going to run for presidency?
Yes, in 2024. No, I am. We're going to talk about those in upcoming episodes, but I'm not going to tell you who they are. And so it got me. It got me looking at the White House. Okay, and so I got a quiz of 10, 15 questions. And I don't think you're going to get one of them right.
Oh, no.
It's actually really.
To say I agree with you.
It's really good for trivia, like especially when just no one knows it.
They're
really fun.
This is good. When I was doing my research, I was like, okay, yeah, that's actually I didn't know it until I started doing the research, and so or I didn't remember pieces of this. So
wait,
real quick though, I had a thought. About the Brent Hole 2024 campaign.
Yeah.
You would just ban McMansions, but I was thinking about that.
That'll be my
there's a whole lot less restrictive building code.
And when you have the my whole platform.
Your platform, will be your running platform.
But anyways.
Okay, so
wait, hold on. We are really about to take a trivia that you just said I didn't know the answer to a lot of these.
No, I knew the answer to 75% of them.
The reason people watch Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader is because everyone's past fifth grade, and they're like, "Oh, I know how to answer fifth grade questions," so it makes it like fun for the view.
Oh, this will be fun.
Okay, yeah.
And you better have fun. Okay, so
I'm gonna beat Richard.
What style?
We'll see about that.
What style is the White House?
I'm not gonna beat Richard.
Well, since George Washington built it, it's Georgian. No,
Georgian style is King George.
Do we just say it?
No, we write it down.
No. You just say it. You say it. We're not writing it down.
Why are we pen and paper? You said before this episode, get pen and paper.
I changed my mind.
This is gonna sound dumb, but is it federal because it's a federal building? I don't know.
I was thinking colonial.
I don't know.
Okay, first of all, Georgian is named after King
George,
not George Washington, just so we're clear, okay?
I knew that.
Okay.
Half point?
It's federal, okay, has to do with more like the federal papers and federal-ist, not a federal building.
The details.
Okay, so
it's so confusing.
Yeah. No, it is a little bit confusing. So
colonial.
So there's colonial, the word colonial means, like a colony,
from the colonies,
right?
Yeah.
That before we were a state. Okay, before we were the United States.
That's a dumb answer.
So it's not colonial because it was not built when we were colonies. Okay, so it is.
Wait. Can we guess again?
Well, we'll come back to it. Yes, you can guess again.
It's a period revival. I don't know.
We've said all the styles I know.
Okay. I've actually shot my load there. I don't know.
Federal.
Okay, so let me ask this question.
Georgian.
When?
I know it's not Victorian. I know it's not Victorian. Wait, can you tell us the answer?
No, because I got to come back to it.
Do you think using context clues we'll be able to figure it out?
I think so.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to help you out. Okay.
I'm calling it now. He's going to spoil it. He's going to accidentally give it away. And that's why they built it in the Brownian style. We're going to go, uh-oh.
Who was the architect for the White House?
I know this one. Should I wait? I want to let him think.
I remember you said it in one of the building in Bruce, but you said a lot of names.
Yeah, there's a lot of names.
Is it?
You may be thinking of the Capitol building and not the White House.
I am. I don't know.
Samuel McIntyre? No.
No.
Okay.
Is it an architect or was it a president?
He's an architect, not a president.
I want to say it starts with an A, the last name, or I don't know.
Give us more hints.
What does it rhyme with?
Okay. Okay. Let me ask this question.
0 for 2. 0 for 2. Here we go.
We'll talk.
We're really crushing.
Okay. Where was the first? Okay. So let's put it in context. Okay.
Brent's like, oh, it's a bad idea.
So
he's morons.
When was the American Revolution?
1776. 1775.
Okay. And it lasted until
1778.
Yeah, like
they
80,
signed
80,
the Declaration
90 or something like that. And so it was about a 4 or 5 year war. Okay, so we're talking in what period of time architecturally?
Those points?
No, this is all context still. You do not get a right answer for that.
I've said all the styles of architecture I know. Federal, Georgian, Victorian, colonial. Those are the ones I know.
Okay, it starts with Georgian because King George.
Yeah, it goes Georgian, Federal, then Victorian right after.
No, it goes Greek Revival after that,
Greek
and
Revival.
then Victorian.
So it is Greek Revival.
He said it. Gave it away.
It is
Greek Revival.
No, it's not. So
So it's after Victorian. It's the one after Victorian. That's what that means.
Stop.
Okay.
So
Right.
the Georgian period typically ends around the 1780s. Okay, and so the Federal period, okay, or neoclassicism, okay, starts, right after that time. Now, in England, it's a little bit different than America because
America's getting inspired by England.
Yes, exactly. So there's a delay. Okay, so the Federal period typically starts after the American Revolution, 1780s to about 1820. Okay, so that's context. So it was Georgian until the American Revolution, Federal until about 1820. Okay. So there's your context. Where was the first White House?
Oh, I know this one. Pennsylvania.
I didn't know.
Philadelphia, right? Was it New York?
Yes.
Okay.
It was New York.
Because the hub started in New York, then went to Pennsylvania, then went to D.C.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So good, Jackson. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I'm so competitive, Richard. I'm like, suck it.
So realize that DC wasn't a city, right? DC wasn't even there until they voted it and made it. Okay. And so most of the activity, economic and otherwise, was happening in New York, but they didn't want to have the capital so far out of the middle of the country. And so they came down to Philadelphia, and then they voted for it to be in DC. So, and DC was basically swampland. Okay. There wasn't anything there when they decided to do it. So when was the White House built?
It definitely was after 1820s because that was the end of the federal era. So 1850s.
You're so wrong. I mean, the gusto that you answered that question was just...
You said it's not federal. You said it's not.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
What? He said
it
federal.
It is federal then?
He was right. No.
He was right.
No.
I was thinking 1821.
We're tied then.
You said, is it federal because it's a federal building? Okay.
No, he just said federal.
I was thinking
my answer was
federal
federal,
in more like a governmental building. It's not federal. Okay?
Oh, I thought I had it.
The answer is not federal. Let me just say that. I just thought you were saying federal because it was like a governmental building.
Well, that was my logic. Was like, well, it's federal, like Federal Express.
Oh Oh my gosh. So
You just want to embarrass us. Just admit
Yeah,
it. No.
you're just proving.
oh,
you're the
I
master.
know. Yes. No, I'm putting you in your place. So
Know
the
your place in the
first, the first, president's house, obviously when it was in New York, wasn't called the White House. It's called the White House.
It
because
was a
it's-
White House.
It's a White House, right? And so it was first in New York, and then it went to Philadelphia, as Jackson said, and then it went to D.C. But the year that was started being built was 1791, not 1850.
But so it was.
That was close. 50
It
years.
was built
Close.
Give or
during
take half a century.
in a federal period.
Yes, it was. It was built during a neoclassical period. Okay. Now, the architect was this guy named James Hoban. So we're going back to the first question.
I did not know that.
Okay, was a guy named James Hoban, who was an Irish architect. Okay. Now, the things that he was studying, the things that he was looking back, and here's that delay. Okay, is that it ended up being a very classical building, a Georgian Palladian kind of layout and kind of style, because those are the books that he was looking at. And basically, Thomas Jefferson, wanted to have when they were trying to figure out how they were going to build the great city of our capital, they opened it up to competitions. And so the competition was for the White House. There was a competition for the state capitol, and those were the White House was won by an Irish architect named James Hoban, and the state capitol was won by a kind of a doctor.
Did he know it?
Yeah, well, that's who I thought he was thinking of.
Nah, I was off.
Oh.
So, and he was kind of a gentleman architect, and he had won the state capitol competition. And so the James Hoban was the one who designed the thing. And you figure in 1780, the things that he's looking at, into the 1790s were things that were kind of more past style. And so it's this neoclassical, classical building with, Palladian influences.
So the answer is it's like a hybrid.
Yes. Yeah.
So if someone said,
And-
"Hey, what style's the White House?"
What would you say?
I would say it's a classical building. But here's the problem with answering that question. And we're going to go into these next questions.
I'm glad you let off with a trick question. That was fun.
So is because it's been added on to so many times and changed a bunch of times, as we'll see when we go into these
That
next
was fun.
questions. It's not this is the answer.
History's hard, Richard.
Who was the first president to occupy the White House?
John Quincy Adams.
John Quincy Adams.
That's correct. What year did they do that?
He was the fourth president. Is that right? Third?
No, he's the fourth. Washington,
Adams.
Jefferson.
Adams, John Quincy.
Yeah,
When was it built again?
1790.
So
1791
Washington
then.
It got completed in 1797. It took 8 years.
So look, George,
They
George
started
Washington
building
was
in
4 years. John Adams was 4 years. No, Jefferson was 4 years. And that's 8 years after 1776, right? So it's 1784, and then 1788, and then 1792.
No, Washington had 2 terms,
Oh, he did. Okay, so 1796,
and Jefferson had 2 terms.
1780. No, 1800.
18.
Whoa, you figured that out. That's crazy. That's good logic, though, like putting that together.
I didn't know they had 2 terms. Did you know they had 2 terms?
I don't
So
even know who these people are. No, I'm joking. I know.
I don't even know who these
so
guys are.
John Quincy Adams is the first one to occupy the White House. Okay. You know what? No. Your math is wrong.
We just did 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4.
I know, but you started in 1776. We don't finish the war until 1780. We don't inaugurate a president until like
So
17
1804.
So then your 2 terms
1782.
math was wrong.
So then no, he still had 2 terms, but it doesn't start until like 1780 something, and then his 2 terms take it to 1790.
Because wasn't there a 0th president technically?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to ask Google when Washington's first term was.
Well, there was a guy before Washington, right?
When was Washington's first term? It might not know. 1789. Okay.
Whoa.
So it is like 1790. So I wrote down John Adams, but it isn't John Quincy Adams. It's John Adams. Okay. It's the first one. So he's 2 terms. They finished the White House, and John Adams, the second president, is the first one to do it. And the reason I got thrown off is because
He was the second.
Yeah.
Jefferson was the third,
and Jefferson's the third.
and then Quincy was okay.
And because Jefferson goes into the White House going, this thing is huge. I mean, I can't live here. Remember, his wife died. He was just by himself, but it was this palace, this mansion he thought was too big.
You're saying remember like his wife died, like we knew that.
Maybe the viewer knew it. 'Cause I think it's apparent we don't know. Well, I don't know much of anything. You're figuring it out, though. You remembered that stuff.
Good test taker.
Okay. When was the see how they asked
When
this
was
as
the
a
War of
question.
1812?
Yeah. When was the War of 1812?
1812.
Okay. When did the White House burn?
Ooh, I didn't know it burned.
I didn't either. Actually, I remember you mentioned it in the talk, too.
Well, let's see, because 1943 was a big drought year. Just kidding.
The famous Washington drought of 1942. No.
The D.C. drought.
No idea. I don't know.
I didn't know it burned. Who repaired it? Maybe we can figure out context clues by that.
Well,
Or who was in office?
I don't know the answer to that.
Grover
But-
Cleveland.
Yeah, no. But we did bring up the War of 1812 when we started this question.
Oh, it was 1812.
1814.
Close enough.
So the British basically, went into Washington and were literally burning the White House. And an act of God came along, literally, and this storm came through. And it was a tornado and like these high winds, and it literally drove the British out of Washington.
What?
I'm dead serious.
That is cool.
And,
That is cool.
but they were burning the White House. It burnt, and it didn't get restored until like 1817.
That's
okay?
why we say God bless America.
There you go. And so the other thing that happened is that here's where I go back to my question about what style is it, because in 1824 and in 1830, those porticos were added on, the famous
sides?
porches and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so those weren't there when it was first built. Okay. Furthermore, it then gets added on and added on and added on, like the West Wing. The West Wing was added like in the 1900s, 1930s. Okay.
And that's where they do everything now,
the
dude.
Oval Office.
It's like the top secret place now.
The
right?
Oval Office wasn't added until 1913. Right, the famous Oval Office. That wasn't. I would have thought that was a federal period, that would Oval style. No, it didn't. It didn't happen until
Oval Office is
William-
the president's office.
Yes.
For all our Australians and Canadians listening.
True. Yes. Thank you.
They probably knew that, though.
And so there was a very famous change in 1902 by Teddy Roosevelt and McKean, Mead, and White.
Are you burning all your questions now? Are you just...
I totally have lost it, haven't I? Okay. Who... I'm going to go back to the question. Who added steel structure reinforcement to the White House?
Teddy
McCain,
Roosevelt.
Meade, and White.
No. So there's a famous picture showing the interior of the White House with like bulldozers pushing around the floor and doing all this other stuff.
Wait, inside?
Yeah. And so it's just the shells on the outside.
That is crazy to think about how much that thing has changed. What is the
it's
historical
changed.
tour showing?
Well, so it was.
Look
it
at
was
how good we are at restoring
well,
stuff.
one of the reasons. Well, blowing my questions. So, what was the architectural stylings that McKean, Mead, and White and Teddy Roosevelt changed?
What did you say that they added?
Porticos.
Those
Porticos were
porticos?
1817 and 1824.
Oh, man. That's
Columns.
Wish
No.
I paid more attention in history class.
It had become a very Victorian building, okay? And McKean, Mead, and White, who were practicing classical detailing, basically tore out all the Victorian stuff that was in there and made it this neoclassical, house again. Remember that I did a video.
I did not think the White House was ever Victorian.
I didn't either.
Well, you don't see any evidence of it now because in 1902,
Roosevelt was like, get this frou-frou nonsense out of
get
here.
this, yes. And so
Man's man.
they got the Victorian stuff out of there. And the rooms that you see now are basically those rooms as they had them. Now, realize that
As they had him in 1902 or as they had him in like 1800s?
no, the 1902 is kind of a recreation of
Back to the history.
it's McKee Mead White's version of what that neoclassical look should have been. It's basically not a very historical building as far as having like original moldings from that period or original things from the 1790s. Yeah, there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm. But you've done a window restore on the White House, right?
No, we built some windows that were decorative mirrors for the White House Historical Association that were based off the windows at the White House. That's what you're thinking of.
Told a lot of people that.
What president put the steel structure?
A lot of people that.
You told people you built the windows.
Have you really?
I said, he's restored windows in the White House. And they're like, wow. But
I might as well have.
It's the same
I gotta
thing.
It's
stop
the
saying
same
that.
thing. It's the same thing, exactly.
I've told a lot of people that.
So, who was the president who put steel structure inside the White House? And one of the clues for this thing would be, think about what was happening politically, that they would have had.
I know.
That they would have had to do this so that there's
They're appeasing the steel companies.
no.
Oh, I thought it was Rockefeller. I thought it was like around that time, like
No.
1901, 1902.
No.
Is it Lincoln?
I'm thinking no. I'm thinking more
I don't know.
security.
Oh, security.
Trump.
Cold War era, maybe? Cold War?
Oh.
I don't know when that is, but I know they had to add some security.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
My son
1960s?
is historically illiterate.
1960s?
42.
Cold War was right before World War I, II?
No, but the Russian threat, okay?
Wait, Cold? Oh, yeah. I was thinking Cuban
42
Missile
to
Crisis.
52 is when that restoration took place.
So that was right in the middle. Okay, so I guess that makes sense because there's a lot of manufacturing.
The Cold War starts in basically the end of World War II. Sorry.
Yeah.
So World War II ends in 45. GIs come home 46. Cold War starts.
So this was really not even that long ago.
No.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was less than 100 years ago. And so
So that was 1940s, 1950s.
the modernization of that.
And that's the whole house.
Yeah. I mean, you see the bulldozers driving around inside there. But think about what was going on. That the Cold War is happening, that we have this nuclear threat. Remember, we dropped the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Big boy. Fat man and little boy.
The two bombs.
Yeah.
And so the most important structure, right, symbolic structure of the American presidency and everything else is the White House. And so there has to be, it was basically realized that it was, wildly inefficient and wildly, unsafe, the way it was constructed, that they changed the, all that interior and all that stuff there so that, they modernized it basically. And so if you think from the historic preservation side, for me, it's really not even a very historic building.
Yeah.
It has,
That's why you didn't do the windows on it, because it's just not.
yeah,
not good
exactly.
enough.
You turned it down.
Yeah.
Turn it down. Yeah,
said no
exactly.
to
I don't
it.
have time. There's when you realize that they took out all the Victorian stuff in the early 1900s,
Yeah.
they basically recreated these rooms. I did a video on building a header with this Indian head looking thing, and this whole built up curved structure is a neoclassical entry. I did one of my videos on rebuilding that at the White House. That was a creation of McKee, Mead, and White. That wasn't necessarily something that was there. Well, yeah. When was the last major remodel at the White House? And realize that every president that comes in, the husband and wife typically get to remodel the West Wing wherever the family is.
Actually?
Yeah.
So someone in there could be like, I'd like a modern look, and then just add a bunch of windows.
Well, I don't. They can't add windows, but they would, change all the drapes, change the colors, change the carpet, change it would just make it their own. And so, who was the last president and president wife to change the White House?
Kennedy.
Dude, help me out here.
You got to give me one.
So he's up 1-0.
I'm looking pretty
he's
bad.
He's up 1-0 on me. Or are we tied now?
We're tied. Yeah, 1-1.
1-1. Okay. Game on, baby.
Who designed Washington, D.C.?
Like city planner?
Yeah. He was an architect.
Thomas Jefferson.
No. He was a Frenchman.
Petit Louvre. I don't know.
Pierre Charles L'Enfant.
Oh, yeah.
Good thing you speak Spanish.
Yeah. So if you look at the design, the original design of Washington, D.C.,
wow.
You will see that there was a whole philosophical way of laying out the city.
It is pretty it is pretty gridular, or you know what I mean?
Well, you can look at this plan and look what's going
Whoa.
on. Look, this is the original plan by Infantance or whatever.
You mispronounce his name so
and
bad.
there's a symbolic relationship between the Capitol there on the right and the White House there on the left, that they are symbolically tied together. And the lawn actually went through a number of iterations. Right now it's really wide open and
it is.
And just grass and everything else. In the late 1800s, it was like a forest. It was like
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was all these trails. It was all this
kind of like what's that park in New York? Like that one.
Central Park.
Central Park.
And in fact, it was the same, by the way, who designed Central Park?
Petit
these are guys you should know. Frederick Law Olmsted. Okay, and so he is a famous. He did.
That was my next guess.
Frederick Law Olmsted did the Biltmore. He was was the very, very famous designer who.
Oh my gosh!
He was basically the very first landscape architect in America, and he was he helped lay out the city of Buffalo. He helped. He made all these beautiful cities. Here's the point in this history mess I've created here.
I think this is great.
Okay,
personally.
So one, to me, it's fascinating how the city of city of Washington, the District of Columbia, it came about. Right, that it was swampland, that it took forever to build. And Austin, pull up the Washington Monument.
That's one of also the thing, like just the swamplands and everything. There were a lot of people that went missing in Virginia at the beginning, right? Like a lot of settlers.
I don't know that.
There were a lot of like.
What do you think about Jamestown?
Maybe Virginia Woolf, is that one?
No, I mean I don't know about it. If it is,
author.
She's an author. If you look at what do you guys notice about the stone there on that building?
It's definitely rotted, or not rotted, but like colored at the bottom layers there, and then at the top layers, it is not.
Look at another picture of it, kind of back view.
There's something that I remember hearing about this. Like, did they restore it brick by brick or something? They did something crazy with it.
Go to that second picture, right there. So what do you see happening there?
I mean, it's two halves.
Right. So basically, what happened is that. That Washington Monument started to get built and then stopped for about 40 years. It was stuck like that.
And it post World War II, right? They came back.
No, it was like Robert Mills was the architect for it, and they basically started it in like 1812 or 1820 or 30, and then it basically sat there until like 1880.
That's a cool little fact.
After the Civil War. But
Civil War.
It's interesting to me because this is it is a parallel to how our country grew, that we didn't have any money, right? And one of the reasons the White House took so long to be built, that the whole city, that thing sat there for 40 or 50 years without being finished, because we were just a young country trying to figure it out, didn't have much money, and was just kind of
oh my gosh, that's so weird to look at.
Yeah. So The other interesting building in Washington
Those guys
is
up there.
is the U.S. Capitol, and so the Capitol building too was a building that, we didn't occupy until like Abraham Lincoln, because we were putting steel structure in that building. Now, if you want to talk about steel and early steel structure, that is the building that, if you look at early pictures of that, state capitol, think about how America was growing, the U.S. Capitol. As we add states, as we add things, more people or more representatives, more senators are coming to the state capitol. And so an early picture of this thing, that's when they're rebuilding it during the
1863.
Yeah, the Civil War era. But if you go back to the early designs, it was a timber framed building. And so, if you think about that
and timber frame, they shoot the timber frames all the way up, right?
That's balloon framing. So timber framing would be large timbers. But if you consider that the last states like California and Oregon and Washington and things were becoming states in the 1850s, Texas becomes a state in 1845, I think. So there's states becoming things in the 1870s, and so it keeps growing on them. And so when they first are building the state capitol, there's 13 colonies, right? Mm-hmm. And so then there's maybe 15, 20, and all of a sudden in less than 100 years it doubles in size. And so the state capitol, or the U.S. Capitol, kept growing and growing and growing. And Charles Bulfinch's version of the state capitol, who was the Boston architect, very famous in the early 1800s, he is one of the designers for the U.S. Capitol. I mean, architects in general, look at that. There's Bulfinch's version.
Is that a drawing or is that a picture?
That's a picture.
Wow.
Well, it looks like a picture. So it's just fascinating to me that the U.S. Capitol that we see today, the White House and all those things, are actually very modern buildings, or very new buildings. The colonial era, early Georgian, early federal, Greek revival time period, those buildings aren't even around.
That is so crazy.
Buildings changed so much in this period of time.
It seems like specifically the important buildings change, and then some more residential homes don't change and don't have the.
And you have starting with the rise of our capital, right? You have a new building type. Those were a big civic building, right?
Yeah.
That was, most houses were residential in scale. Yes, that's a very small building. Relatively. So you think about the rise of the city, okay, that, and skyscrapers, which happened after 1880, but it's a very rural or a very primitive type of building until you get into steel construction and things like that happen after the Civil War. So anyway.
And that's where the Liberty Bell, the new Liberty Bell, is housed, right? Is it Independence Hall?
It's across the street. There's actually a special building across the street.
Wait, no, there's the Liberty Bell that's sitting out front of that one building. Right? You know what I'm talking about?
Well, across the street to the right of that picture is the Liberty Bell, thing.
Well, the cracked one.
Yes, and it's sitting there.
That's where the new one is.
I don't know that.
Yes, it is. I promise. I saw it in National Treasure. It's as funny as it is. I think I'm right.
Yeah, there it is.
But that's the cracked one. And then Independence Hall is where the new Liberty Bell sits.
So, cool stuff. I think we all should know. What's interesting is, I asked, the first question was, what style is the White House?
We both have question marks, and mine's blank for the first one.
I just gave up. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is, even a fool when he holdeth his peace is counted wise. And that's why I haven't been talking, because I've been saying some dumb things.
You've been looking wise for the latter half.
But it's cool because I'm sure a lot of people don't know this stuff as well.
Totally.
So I've learned a ton.
Me too.
It's interesting to me as a historic geek. I love Washington D.C. I think it's a beautiful city. Architecturally, it used to be one of my favorites. I think Jefferson Memorial and Lincoln Memorial are awesome buildings. Okay, they are fairly new buildings, right? They're built in the early 1900s, and so you see these buildings, and the style is very classical, is very traditional. McKean and White helped with some of those, and so they're gorgeous buildings, right? And they're taken from historic presidents like Villa Rotunda or the Parthenon, right? And so, or Pantheon, And so, you look at that. I mean,
There's the
those are temples, right? That's a Greek temple. And so it's just, those buildings are exciting to me. They're strong, they're bold, they're,
Doric.
and so you are, these are temples of of freedom, of democracy, of, they're celebrations of kind of our past and things like that. So I think it's fascinating, but there really isn't that much old stuff there. If you really want to go see old stuff, you need to go to Philadelphia or Boston, not even New York. New York's not as old as Boston or Charleston or some of these cities. So anyway, just kind of in perspective, right? The White House is, a very traditionally designed building, but it's, as a preservationist, it's very new.
Yeah.
And there's Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, which is
beautiful,
an awesome building.
You just did a video there, right?
Yeah. So that's where the very first guild was. In fact, I think it's appropriate showing that picture for our podcast, right? That's where, the guild system starts and lives for a long time in America, is in the Carpenter's Hall. And, that's where the leading figures, of building were, where training happened. There was a guidebook that they had that they, it was a secret price book that, when a carpenter died, he had to hand it back in. The wife had to hand it back in.
Wow.
Because it was like, Thomas Jefferson tried to get a copy of it and famously couldn't get one. No one would let him see
because he wasn't a carpenter.
He wasn't part of the guild. So it's kind of crazy.
Gosh, that's really neat. And really, it gets me excited for what Dan is doing with his shop out in California, just because we could have that again. And I think that would be so beneficial, even just have like maybe not even a price book, but just a secret trade book. Of
I think we all want to know, am I good or not?
Right.
Where do I stand? And his kind of testing and his kind of thing, which is the way those, masters used to work,
right.
Was,
It answers the question.
Yeah.
It answers the question, am I good, or how good am I? Where do I fall on a scale?
what am I worth? Right. And I think he said that.
Yeah.
It solves a problem for the management too. Like, I'm going to send these guys here. Are they good enough?
Yeah,
well, the price
true.
thing always comes into like cost of living. That throws just the biggest wrench in it because it's less standardized. Like, I'm sure it was a lot more standardized back then. I'm sure there were some discrepancies, but a lot more standardization across cost of living.
Here's the deal. I think that the study of Washington, D.C. and the White House and these buildings is fascinating. One, because of how buildings change, and it reflects, Washington, D.C., in my mind, reflects, our country growing up, our country, becoming, when America's first starting, it's a joke, right? And when in 1790s is an experiment, everybody's like, well, that's not going to work, right? And it does work. And these incredible men, put together this system of checks and balances and everything else, and it's reflected in the architecture. And so, as the country grows, as the country matures, as the country, becomes stronger, both politically, militarily, industrially, the state capital, the U.S. Capitol ends up becoming this, building that's just like a transformer. I mean, it's just like it's growing, and it's just like it was a timber frame. Then it's got a steel structure. There's a huge dome, and all of a sudden there's wings. And
then it turns into a car.
It's a reflection of the economy,
totally,
of the immigration. I remember one day I was listening to this audiobook about Benjamin Franklin, and I just had an epiphany, like, whoa, this was only a couple hundred years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just hit me one day, and I just looked around me. I was driving. I was like, we are such in a blessed place.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
It's amazing that the experiment worked, right? And
mm-hmm.
and you think about the continued growth of our country, with the immigration and, a state like California that, is very small. And then as it continues to grow, the number of representatives grows, the number of, it's just the whole country's growing. And the state, our U.S. Capitol, is also growing and changing and morphing. And so, the White House isn't an historic building.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the main thing is it is a
A reflection of where we've come from.
Yeah, and just it's actually a pretty modern building, and the things that Truman was doing in the 40s and 50s to modernize it for a Cold War that was happening, right? It needed to become a steel structure inside, both symbolically and physically. And so, anyway, I think it's fascinating, and the confusing way we started with all those questions, like the first, president's house wasn't even in D.C., right? And the first guy isn't Washington in the White House, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, because we just assume first president at White House is there. It's all like
you assume it's all there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because the White House is there currently.
Yeah.
I mean, when Biden moved in the office, it was like, well, he's going to move into the White House because it's right there. It's not.
And then to read the stories that, Jefferson thought it was too big, but by the time, I don't remember who was in there, it was a crowded mess. And then they have to do the West Wing and the East Wings to make more room because it was just too small. And it's just like, and then they put a second story in the West Wing. It's just like,
it's a never-ending renovation.
It's true.
The thought of them going in and saying, hey, this is the White House. This is the place where the president's going to live. President walks in. This place is massive, like way too many rooms for me. And then them almost double or triple in size. Like,
yeah. And I did a tour one time of the White House, and I was in for a traditional building show, and the architect of the White House, took us.
Architect.
Well, he was then. It was just 10 years ago. Took us around, and they have there's a flower shop in there. There's a woodworking shop in there. Like there's a little city in there of workers trying to do the business of what the president's house needs. Wow. And it was really cool. We went down to the wood shop of the White House, and it wasn't very big. It's probably as big as this room, but there were some tools and wood, and what were they doing? They were making repairs, right? I mean, there's how many hundreds of people in there every day moving around, breaking things, and they're needing to maintain it. It was pretty cool. And obviously there's tunnels out of there. There's all kinds of security stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so
it's like Disneyland.
It's crazy. Anyway, it's cool.
That's cool. Well, again, this is the first time we're trying this format. We would love to hear your comments. So please do comment that, as well as the fact about the White House that that nobody else knows.
Yeah, I'm sure I screwed up some facts in there. So
I would love to know the corrections.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Everything he got wrong. And everything me and Richard got right.
The paper's blank. 2 question marks.
Yeah, I started writing down the names of some of these people that you're like, you got to know this guy. Frederick Olmsted.
Frederick Law Olmsted.
Yep. And then Charles Bulfinch.
Yes.
I started doing it pretty late on, so didn't have very many. But thank you for watching this episode of Passion for Craft podcast. We are super glad you're here. Again, put in the comments fun fact about the White House you didn't know, and or all the corrections that we got wrong. And I believe you asked only 6 questions. So how many questions that you got right? Would be very curious to see if someone out there just knew all of those offhand. Sure. I think that'd be really cool. Before you go, please like and subscribe. Would love your following. And then if you want to go deeper and dive into this rabbit hole with us, please do so in our Patreon. Join that thing. We want to give you a ton of benefits there. So join up. You'll get access to the Discord, as well as a bunch of our episodes that haven't been released yet, and some behind-the-scenes content, including us talking about what we thought of this episode. Thanks for watching.